We are here with the wonderful, amazing, magical Rose Wang and one of my friends from college, actually, one of my personal friends. I'm so happy to have her here on the show. Rose, thank you for being here with us and taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you both so much for having me. This is so exciting. I can't wait to talk to a mother-daughter duo.
Well, y'all have missed the little prelude when Rose and my mom were chatting and kind of making fun of me a little bit, but that's totally okay. We were
This is
having fun already. We're just chit-chatting and finally decided we should probably record something.
I know this has already been fun and it's been only 5 minutes.
So Rose is one of my friends that I talk to all of my close family members and other friends about because she's one of my friends that I just am so proud of what she has done and the journey that she has been on. Rose, as you've already heard, is the founder of Chirps and now co-author of a brand new book called Eat Bugs Project Startup, which y'all, it is number one currently on Amazon's new releases for children's jobs and career reference books.
Go Rose.
Go Rose. And her co-authors, of course, Heather Alexander as well, and Laura DeSaro. But Rose, thank you for being here again. And of course, everything that I've seen when you've talked to people, everyone asks you the token question, but I do think we should start there for our listeners. Tell us how you came up with the idea of Chirps along with Laura and how it came to be.
absolutely. That is generally the question because how many people decide to start a company about feeding people with bugs? It's very unusual. Um,
Unique and special.
Yes, yes. Thank you for the right words. So speaking of college, Laura was one of my college roommates in school, and Laura has always really deeply cared about the environment. In fact, she's been vegetarian most of her life because of sustainability reasons. But that all changed when she was in Tanzania one summer, as she was an African studies major, and she saw a street vendor selling fried caterpillars, and it was a win in Tanzania. Everyone around her was like, you should try it. And so she bought one. She was scared, but she was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And she put in her mouth, and her first thought was, this tastes like lobster, which is amazing. And once we realized that that made sense because insects incrustation are very closely related. In fact, we call insects seafood of the land. And so when she had that experience, it went off a light bulb went off on her head. Why are people eating bugs in Tanzania and not other parts of the world?
Mhm.
And so when she got back to the US, she started researching why are people eating bugs? And what she found out as she did that research is that insects are one of the most sustainable protein sources.
Mhm.
Um, and it's on all fronts, not just CO2 emissions, but water usage, food waste. And so we can go to that later, but it was the spark she needed of, hey, we have so many different protein sources and we're ignoring one of the most sustainable ones. And so she sent me an article about it and was like, this is what I would do with my life. Uh, and I had just come back from China where I had a very similar experience and was dared to eat a fried scorpion. And so I jumped on board and I was like, you know what? I'm super into this idea as well. And that's how it all started in college.
That's all. And this was senior year.
This was senior year. Yes.
Nice.
You know, Mariana has told me numerous times one of the things that she misses most about college is in the dining hall or, wherever y'all are gathered, the conversations that y'all would have with each other and just the mind blowing experiences people had and their ideas and how y'all would bounce ideas off of each other. I never heard, I cannot imagine coming up with the idea of eating bugs anywhere else other than a college conversation. Like, and I see why Mariana misses them so much. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
talking about coming up with a unique idea outside the box.
It is.
I think college is a great place.
It's completely outside the box. And I know you mentioned environmental, but which is obviously very important to us. But one of the things that I point out, especially when we're talking to some of our guests, I think a token sign that you're like on the right path, or that an idea is really truly important and vital, is when it ticks several boxes, right? It's not just profitable. It's not just good for the environment. It's also good for your health. It's also good for social issues. And that's one of the things that, or one of the reasons you and Laura have been so inspirational for me in the last several years is, we're going to go into some of the other reasons, but one of the main ones is I feel like Chirps does that. It ticks all of those boxes, and you realize, okay, we're on to something, because this is not just good in one arena. So you touched on the environmental aspects, but for our listeners, can you give us the highlights of why your business model and eating insects in general is environmentally beneficial, but also health-wise and socially?
Yeah, absolutely, Mariana. And I think that's really what appealed to us about insects is oftentimes in the consumer world, there's a lot of marketing around healthy or sustainable, but what they don't talk about is that oftentimes everything is systemic, right?
Mhm.
If you have compostable packaging, that's more cost. And so you're going to have to find somewhere else to get that cost to go down from somewhere else. And that's the part they don't talk about. And so, what was so appealing about Chirps to us and the idea of eating bugs is that it's a systemic change. Because when we look at the food system, it's not one thing wrong, it's a lot of things that are broken and they're all tied together. So, I just want to have you guys imagine a world where this is really what got us excited about bugs is that right now we know what the problems are in food, right? Food is traveling halfway across the country, if not the world.
Mhm.
There's a lot of freshwater usage where a lot of our lands are drying out because it's monoculture culture of soy or corn that's being fed to our traditional protein sources. All of like to make a pound of beef, it takes 2,000 gallons of water. To make a pound of crickets, it only takes 1 gallon of water.
Wow.
Um, which is incredible. And so it's not only, but then the other problem is then once you make all the food, about half of the food is wasted in the US. It gets thrown away. And so all the resources we use to create that food just all goes to waste. And so what was cool about insects is that you can basically fix all these problems with one system. So, unlike most proteins like cows or pigs, you can actually raise crickets in cities. So, think about like Youngstown, Ohio, or Detroit, Michigan, where there's a lot of empty warehouses. Those
Mhm.
make perfect cricket farms. And so, all you need is essentially a building that's temperature controlled. And of course, you want to have the right protocol around sanitation, but ultimately, this is a true urban farm. And so then once you have the crickets in your urban area where you can put up your farm right next to your factory, you're already reducing the distance that food has to travel. Then the cool thing about bugs is that or crickets especially, it's a 4 to 6 week life cycle. So they get raised. We eat 100% of the cricket. And then what are they fed on? They can be fed on food waste. In fact, that's what crickets eat out in the wild, right? So they eat grains, they eat vegetables, and so why not take food from your local farm if that's not being used? Perfect cricket feed. So that's a virtuous cycle. And then once the crickets, the one thing they have is frass, their poop, and that can be used as fertilizer. And so it's this complete food system where the protein itself is extremely easy to create. It's very nutritious, which I'll get into, but that essentially the entire ecosystem is closed and there's very little waste created, and we're mitigating a lot of the problems that we're seeing with other food systems.
I love that
Amazing.
aspect. Closed loop. You pull up my engineering heartstrings right there, Rose. And so
System.
tell us about the, oh yeah, closed system. Tell us about the health benefits, because
Yeah,
I don't think many people know about that either.
totally. Yeah. So, like I said, insects are seafood of the land, and what I in science, they're actually all arthropods. So they're genetically quite similar, and their nutrition structure is quite similar. Um, and so we know seafood is quite nutritious. So are insects. In fact, what's cool about insects is that they're a complete animal protein, and they have more, so they have more protein than beef, even because because something has protein doesn't mean your body processes all of it. And so the bioavailability of crickets is much higher than beef. So your body's processing more of that protein, not going to waste. The other part of it has more B12 than spinach, more B12 than salmon, more iron than spinach. So extremely healthy. And I think that's really important because there are over 2,000 varieties of edible insects. And so when we decided which one we wanted to start out with, the health aspect was really important. And crickets are one of the highest protein and most nutritious, which is why we decided to start with crickets.
Mm. It's so many times we have seen that whenever something is good for the environment, it's good for the human being, like walking and, eating vegetables. And so eating insects, better for the environment and better for the human being.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mom always puts in that little plug.
I love
She's like,
that.
better for the earth, better for us. I'm like,
That's what we
true,
say.
Mom.
Better for you, better for the world.
That's it. So I would love to know if you have consciously seen yourself as an educator throughout this process, because especially now with your new book, and I would love you to talk about that and give audience a little sneak peek. But even before the book, you've always been an educator, and has that been a big part of your mission, or did that just kind of come naturally, or as you just needed to educate people because this was so new?
Yeah, a new
Yeah.
industry.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly right. When we talk about new industries, they always talk about first waves, second waves. And so let's take kombucha, for example. Kombucha only recently got big, but there was one company called GT Synergy that had been around for 15 years that was doing it. And they were the ones who were getting the first adopters. And when you are a first wave company, what you really are is you're educating the market. There's a big reason why people don't want to be first in market, because education is also expensive, right? Most things, it's like at this point, we don't have to tell people kombucha is good for you. So there doesn't have to be additional conversations to convince someone to go and drink kombucha. And so for us, cricket is a new concept in the Western world. And so didn't really matter if we wanted to be educators or not. Like you said, we had to be, because nobody understood why crickets. And so if you don't really have the why behind a product or a service, it's just going to be kitschy. It's going to be something that people use as a fear factor, and it's novelty, and you're going to not have returning customers. But what we were going out to do is we wanted systemic change. To create that systemic change, you need mainstream adoption. To get mainstream adoption as a first time business, we needed to educate. And so absolutely, education is a big, big, big piece of it. And actually, we got really lucky, because I think once we realized that education was a big part of that, we stumbled upon our favorite group of customers, kids.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
right? Because that's the thing, is like what we understood was, when you're an adult and you've been taught your whole life that bugs are gross, that's really hard to change. But for children, they don't naturally have that instinct. It's actually not something we're born with, to be scared of bugs, because we see the kids right in the backyard grabbing the bugs and trying to put it in their mouth.
Yes. I always walked around with frogs in my
In her
pockets and in my
in
mouth.
her hands, she would walk
Like
around
tiny
these little
frogs.
teeny tiny frogs in her
That's so
That was
cute.
good.
So there you go, right? It's not a natural disgust. It's developed through education. And so for us, it's about just educating in the opposite. This is not gross. You've only been taught it was gross. But did you know that 2.5 billion people all over the world eat bugs? It's just a Western concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also from sustainability perspective and our experience, I think many times the way to truly reach adults is also through children, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if parents are seeing their kids asking for chips that are made from crickets or snacks or whatnot, then they first of all want to be informed as to the nutritional value, the taste, all of that stuff, and then their minds start to open up as well. It's, I think, incredible the impact that children can have on society at large.
Yeah. And I think like this is not a secret. Apple went that approach where they gave their iPads for free in schools, and that's how they got their market adoption, right? Because you start early, you get the kids understanding, hey, what is this new world? And it becomes the current world. And so I absolutely agree that kids are a great way to introduce new ideas. And that's why we always want young innovators coming in to help kind of disrupt us old adults in our old ways.
Speaking of disrupting adults, what did your parents think when you came home and said, I want to start selling bugs to eat?
Yeah.
What was your parents' reaction to that?
Yeah,
I can,
totally. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that I'm Chinese, or and my parents are Chinese immigrants from, they lived through the Cultural Revolution in China, and so coming from that background, the name of the game is stability, right? Like, find a good job, keep your head down, and don't introduce too much craziness. And I kind of went the opposite direction, which Jenna, I think you could probably attest to, is quite common with parents and kids. We go the opposite direction.
the pendulum often swings far from the mother tree.
Yep, I can attest to that. And so definitely my parents did not understand. And I don't blame them. Like, it's just the way I grew up was so different from the way they grew up. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but I mean, year 5 in, like, what can they say? It's like pretty clear I'm committed.
Good. Yeah, the mother just had to ask you that question because I think of
Absolutely.
myself as a pretty open-minded mother. And I even was thinking, if Mariana or Montana had come home and told me something like that, I wonder how I would initially reacted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually a perfect segue into my next question. And I don't know if you were possibly expecting me to go to this angle, but
It's not planned, by the way, everyone.
not planned, y'all. Ad hoc. We were actually interviewing a Harvard grad a couple of weeks ago, Jennifer Jewell, an amazing woman, just doing incredible groundbreaking work in the horticulture industry and really bringing to light how important gardening is and how important it is to recognize that connection that we have to plants and gardening. And we started talking about pursuing what it is that you actually want to do and feel called to do despite those social pressures, and to call it out more blatantly, the social pressure attached to having a Harvard degree.
Mhm.
And I know you have mentioned in some of your interviews, but also we've talked about it on a more personal level, the number of manufacturers that turned y'all down and the number of no's that you got, and also having to turn down opportunities with Microsoft or Harvard Business School because you were so driven by this mission that sounds crazy, and a mission that might sound crazy to everyone else except for you and Laura, your co-founders. So it's a very similar experience to mine in some ways. And I don't think a lot of people think about how difficult that can be, but how important it is and soul satisfying it is to be working towards a mission that resonates with you and that has a larger calling and a larger impact, which is to positively change the world. And
Yeah.
so I want you to speak to that, if you don't mind, and your experience and your journey with that, and how you kind of stuck with it and said, hey, peeps, get out the way. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to dedicate my career to bugs for now.
Yeah, no, I love that question, because I think that the media does a really bad job of telling the story of what it's like to be a founder and to kind of go your own way, because it's all packaged up in this really nice narrative, right? Everyone expects there to be a founding story. So we packaged a founding story for you. Now, that's not how life works, right? It's not like, oh, here's a movie and sequential events.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big part of it with founders, is to say that there was no doubt is also false. Like, there was so much doubt throughout time. When I was 22, right out of school, had no professional experience in the real world. When you get your like 200 no, you do question, am I doing something wrong? um, and there were so many moments. I mean, we had an investor once. So I remember the first time we pitched to an investor. He was at Harvard Business School, or like one of the community members, and so we were really excited. This is our first investor pitch, and Laura and I like talked about the world that we were going to build with bugs, and he didn't say anything the whole time. And at the end, he just looked at us, blinked, and he was like, "I've been an investor for 10 years, and this is the worst idea I've ever heard."
Oh, oh,
And
that,
so,
oh, that took my breath away.
and
Oh, that was,
yeah, and it happens so much, and I don't really like. I think if we knew the formula to like, this is how you can keep going, someone would have made a lot of money from that formula by now. Um, the truth of matter is that there is no formula, and it's what you were talking about earlier, is that you have to follow. It's about yourself and knowing yourself, and knowing what to put first in terms of what fulfillment really looks like. And so I don't know. I wish there were a more like polished answer, but to be honest, I think part of it was just because we were young and we didn't know what a no meant. Which is, I think, is the most beautiful thing about entrepreneurship and having young founders, is that there's almost this like bullishness that adults are wrong. Like, oh, they're so set in their ways. They don't really know. And we can pull lots of examples of, Elon Musk, when he 10 years ago came out and said, there's going to be more e-cars on the road than there are, gas cars. Everyone laughed in his face. Now everyone's doing an e-car, right? And so it always is crazy until you make it happen. And so I think as a young person, we were just bullish on that because we hadn't heard no so much yet. And so we weren't beaten down by the world yet. So I think that really helps. And I think also having each other, that oftentimes when I was down, Laura would pull me up and vice versa. And I think it really helps that we were both extremely optimistic people.
Yeah.
And so there were just a lot of different variables that contributed to that. But no, I don't know. Like, there's no real, like, one thing. It was just, and this is what I oftentimes hear from other founders, is that essentially what happens is that you just want this more than anything else. It's not that there aren't other emotions happening, like anxiety, fear, stress. It's just that the desire to do this is louder than everything else. And we just so happen to listen to that voice.
I love that.
You had such an important mission to the world. I think that is a huge part of it. And also, whenever I was listening to you, it reminded me a lot of my life. I have not followed a traditional path in life, and whether it was correct or it wasn't, it was my life.
Yes.
And at the end of my life, I will know I didn't lead the life that society said I should have led. I led Jenna's life, and you are doing that, and you have such an important mission in your life, and thank you for doing that.
Oh,
Thank you, Jenna. Oh, that like made me tear up.
you got the mom cheerleader moment.
It was so
Oh,
good.
it's so true. I mean, God, we need more people to stand up for what's right and to have that mission and know what has to be done.
Yeah.
What's more important than saving the earth and all of us?
Yeah.
It's
There's
so
no more important mission, I don't think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I think there's one thing I have like realized, and sitting here with both of you, I mean, seeing how amazing it is for you to have each other, it gives a glimpse of that there is a part of you that's very full, right? There are people in your lives who care about you. And I feel like that's really important, to be able to decide, you know what, I'm going to go away from what society expects because I can find my fullness currently from something in my life or someone in my life. And so, because I also think to understand why people don't go their own path is also really important. And a lot of it comes from just them not having that stability or the confidence from somebody else that they will be supported no matter what happens. And so I do very much, just looking at you two, think like, what a perfect model, right? Like, how could, like, yes, let's go do it. But Jenna, you were an inspiration for Mariana, right? And so like
And
if
vice versa.
and vice versa, exactly. And so you don't have to do it alone. You're not supposed to do it alone.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Rose. And she always got the little nuggets of wisdom. Okay, well, now tell us all about your book. And for those of y'all who are with us on Patreon, we're actually going to get a sneak peek into like open the book and talk about it in more depth. But tell us about your exciting new book, about the process and what you are hoping that this book will do and how it's going to touch the young lives of the future.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about my book. So this is my book. It's called Eat Bugs Project Startup. And it's based not fully on, or it is like based on our story. It's not us. I do want to be very clear that it is inspired by, but not exactly our story. And this is me, me and my co-founder Laura. And this book has turned our story into a kids fiction series. And so here we're in 6th grade. We go to a school called Brookdale Middle School. And essentially, Jay and Hallie are in the same class, but not friends. And they got assigned to work on a class project together where it's a pitch competition for their class. And Hallie, like my Hallie, like my co-founder Laura, is I would say the kid who just does beats what is it? Marches to the beat of her own drum, and she's always been like that. Versus I grew up more in a very traditional Asian family, and then was trying to find my place in a non-Asian society. And so how these two came together and found their own identities, but also Hallie pushing Jay into trying something different and being very comfortable with that. So it's a story about Chirps and how it started, but it's also a story of friendship, identity, and it's just been so amazing that we were able to turn that story into like a more like Babysitters Club version.
Awesome. And does it touch on the entrepreneurship aspect of it? Obviously through this pitch, but how much on like a businessy perspective does it take, or is it more character development and story?
Yeah, great question. So it is a chapter book. So I do want to open it up. It's thick. It's for grades 3 to 5. And so when we tell people about the book, it's like a mixture between Babysitter's Club, Shark Tank, and How to Eat Fried Worms. For those of you who know that book. And so the why Laura and I did this in the beginning is because what we wanted to do is inspire young kids, but especially girls, to go and pursue their dreams, to go and pursue entrepreneurship. So that was a huge part of it. But a lot of the story is also around, so it is a narrative, right? It's a chapter book, it's a fiction series, but it's told in a way that teaches you the entrepreneurship lessons as it goes along, because essentially the class unfolds where they get they're in their entrepreneurship class, and then the teacher, Mr. Thompson, leads them through different aspects. Let's identify the problem. Okay, now what does an MVP look like? And so we try to teach the entrepreneurship pieces in more like narrative form, because it's much more fun for kids to pick that up.
That's awesome. Well, y'all, you can order it now. I pre-ordered and it hasn't yet arrived, but I can't wait to get my hands on it. And it is trending on Amazon, as I mentioned. So what was your favorite part of creating that book?
Oh man, this is truly one of my favorite things I've ever done in my life. Yeah, I mean, it's so special. I think to be able to have that story out there and really touch kids. And so I would say of the like truly this whole experience. So it was yesterday that I realized what this book meant. So we gave a presentation to 300 kids,
Wow.
3rd to 5th graders. And so we're doing a lot of classroom visits. That is by far my favorite. Because then when we start talking about the book, oh my God, I love all the ideas that kids have. They're like pitching us. They have so many great ideas. And you know, the feedback we're getting is that for a lot of these young kids, the whole point is that we did it when we knew nothing. And so they feel like they can do it too. And so to me, like seeing that happening in real time, that's more than I could have ever asked for.
That's awesome. And it's true. Like people think that again, as you mentioned, it's almost like this movie version of your success and journey that people get and they see you once you've made it. But most of us start out knowing not what we're doing. And I think and we portray that we've made it too, right? That's important to, but for kids, I'm sure seeing that they're like, oh, not only does this adult know everything, but that person definitely knew everything. And
Yeah.
that's great that you were able to open the door for them through your story and to listen, like we're not special. We just did it. We just went for it. And that is awesome. My dog wants to come in, so sorry. He's just at
No
the
worries.
door.
Okay.
Okay, well, we are going to start wrapping it up for the public portion, but y'all join us on Patreon for a sneak peek into their awesome new book. Before we head out, and Mom has her final question that
But,
she always
but it's going to be
asks.
2 final questions this time.
Okay, well, then I'll let you take it away because I had a question, but if you're
No,
taking two.
No, my first, both of them will be brief. Go ahead.
Okay. Going back to Chirps, full circle, do y'all, 15, 20 years down the line, where do you see that going in terms of cricket protein? Because I know you've obviously started with the snacks and kind of packaged it that way, but big vision, where do you see that going?
Thank you for asking that. So, for us, we realize we're bringing people on a journey as well, right? We're gung ho about bugs, but maybe not everyone is. And so, really understanding your customers where they are, super important in the whole business development process. And so, the reason we came out with the cricket chips first and our cookies is that what we realized was in America, we don't have a culture of eating whole animals. We have a culture of eating chicken nuggets. And so, sure, that is how we'll start. And so, if we can turn the crickets into a powder, into a more friendly form, that's what we call our gateway bug food. And then in the future, there's no reason why you go into the store and you see a turkey burger, a beef burger, you got now your Impossible burgers. Why not there be a cricket burger? Crickets are actually animal protein. And when you're actually taking a plant protein and trying to manipulate it into the texture, taste of meat, that's a lot harder than when you already take something that is an animal protein to do that. And so that world is much sooner than I think we even understand. And maybe it doesn't always have to start on in the Western world, but now we're such a global world where food trends in Asia, Africa are becoming much more popular. And so can we utilize our global marketplace to help popularize insect protein? That I think is the real the goal of the future. Is it's just another protein source like anything else that you see in the stores today.
Can't wait. Can't wait to go buy my Chirps burger someday.
Yes.
Rose, I'm sitting here and I want to ask you so many questions.
Well, you can't. We'll have a bonus.
I know. And I think there's even more. But okay, so I have 2 questions. One is not a very deep question at all, but I'm dying to ask you. So pre-COVID, and we could go to cocktail parties, and people would ask you, "So, what do you do?"
Yeah.
What do you say? And what are some of the crazy reactions you've gotten? Because I'd love to know what people say to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's changed over time because when we first started, people used to just like fall out of their chairs and not understand what I was saying. I think things have changed a little bit. So I'm very open. Pre-COVID, when people ask me what I do, I say I make food with bugs. And crickets. And one of my favorite funny responses is that a lot of people are like, "What? Crickets? Like the bug?" And then I I like to troll them and I'm like, no, like the players. So at this point, I think you have to make fun of it a little bit because I get asked like people just stop for a second, right? They're like, wait, did I hear this right? But then now I think what's so amazing is 50% of the people we talk to, they're like, oh my gosh, no way, it's more sustainable, right? And so to see that change now compared to when we first started, I mean, that is just thrilling. That's when you know there's momentum and that we're onto something.
That is thrilling. And that's how I feel about talking about climate change with people. When
Yes.
we graduated from college, so back in 2013, I had to be really careful about saying the words climate change or global warming. And
Yeah.
now I can sprinkle that into conversations anytime I want and people don't fall out of their chair like you were saying.
Yes.
That is great. Mom, last question.
She
I have to
just,
keep her on schedule here.
because she knows I want to ask more
Rose
questions.
is a busy lady.
I know, but it's so interesting. So, okay, Rose, the last question I always ask people is, what is the most important thing that you think each person can do to help reverse global warming and climate change?
Awesome question. To me, it's about taking action because I think so many, um, it's so easy to stand by and say, well, I'm not the problem,
Mhm.
right? It's everyone else. But then if everyone else had that same thought, then there is no change. And so I think it's important for every person to realize the agency and influence and impact that they can have on their communities. And if each person acted like an owner with agency and decided even just one meal I'm going to replace with a more sustainable protein, that has impacts that are so far reaching, that I think that's what it starts with. And it just makes it so much easier because sometimes it's almost like there's too many things to do. I don't know where to start and I give up. And so it's just about taking that first action and committing to it.
I love that. I love
So
that.
true.
It's so true. And I love that so many of our guests say similar things in very different ways, but
Mhm.
there's just so many common threads that people underestimate the impact of personal change and personal action. So thanks for saying that. And eat bugs, of course.
And eat bugs. Yes. I should have just said that. You can just eat bugs.
You can just eat bugs. Well, Rose, we are looking forward to spending time with you in our bonus. But before we let you go, can you please tell our audience how they can learn more about you and your awesome work, etc.?
Yeah, it's very simple. You just go to eatchirps.com.
Awesome. Perfect. I love it. Rose, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I can't wait for us to be able to, in real life, hang out and have a good catch up. You are an amazing human being doing such wonderful things for the world, and we appreciate you.
Oh, so much. And can I hang out with y'all for a little bit too? I won't take the whole
Absolutely.
bit of hanging out with y'all.
Mom, this is my cool friend.
I
I can have a
know.
few cool
I
friends.
like Rose a lot. And thank you so much for sharing your time, expertise, and even more, your passion with us.
Thank you both. Right back at ya.